Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to part two of the witness identification lecture. We are again in week 17, and we just got done with the lecture on witness identification that talked about the different types of identification and how to develop witnesses through investigation, etc. And now we're going to talk briefly about memory and why there are misidentifications out there. And we'll kind of start with this photograph because think about this in a court of law. The jury is in the jury box, and the judge is sitting at his or her bench seat, and there's a witness or a victim up there, and the prosecutor is asking the questions, sir, or ma'am if it's a young lady, do you see the person that committed that crime in this courtroom today? And the witness or the victim puts their finger out like you can see in the photograph here and points and says, that's him or her. That is the person that did the crime. And that type of identification holds just so much weight in any type of trial, whether it be a jury trial, a trial by one's peers, or even a bench trial where there might just be a judge. So a significant part of the trial lawyer's strategy, okay, be it the prosecution or the defense, is the decision of which witnesses to call at trial, which facts to bring up or elicit from each witness, meaning what questions, and the most strategic order in which to present them. And there's a strategy to all of this, including picking a jury, and perhaps we'll have time to talk about that a little bit later. In this country, however, it is estimated that 75% of wrongly convicted defendants, now again, that's not those that a person had something out for somebody else, so they lied to convict them. It's a bad ID. Somebody was identified wrongly, if you will. So 75% of wrongly convicted defendants later cleared by DNA evidence were convicted based largely on eyewitness testimony. So you can see now the importance of this photograph and how it plays into this overall witness identification. And many victims of crimes have something that is referred to as a flashbulb memory, meaning this is a vivid recollection of dramatic or emotionally charged events. And for example, can anyone tell me what you were doing? And some of you may not be old enough for some of these, and some of you might be, so we'll kind of go with a couple of different ones. Can you remember when you first saw or heard about September 11th, the planes that were flown into the Twin Towers? Does anybody remember that? And can you remember where you were, or maybe even what you were doing? I can. How about when Barack Obama became president? Because that was a big deal. And I remember that, and I remember exactly where I was. How about when Michael Jackson died? Does anybody remember? And these are big things, and a lot of times these big things will bring on this flashbulb memory. But there are some drawbacks, again, to people's memory as well. So imagine that you're at a gas station buying milk. Now, why I use that line, I don't know, because if you buy milk at a gas station, I'm not really sure how good it is. Maybe you should go to the grocery store, but I'm just going to use gas station because that's what I use. So sorry about that. So imagine you're at a gas station buying milk, and a man walks in, threatens the employee at the counter, the clerk, robs the cash register and runs out. And the entire ordeal lasts about 5 seconds. And the man you saw looks like that. Now, that was quick. Now, the police have arrived and they've asked you to help them identify the suspect. A lot of times we'll use the word perpetrator, which sounds more professional, but suspect. They will show you a set of pictures, and it's your job, responsibility, if you will, to select the picture of the man you saw that robbed the gas station. And they show you these photos. Now, some of you, even though you only got a couple seconds to see the person, you may be able to point right to the person, and some of you may be having a little more trouble, because if you look at these 10 people, they're somewhat similar. And if you look at, if you want to know who the person was to show if you're right or wrong, number 2. Now, if you're wrong, don't worry. There's different reasons for why you may have been wrong, but so, we know which picture, or hopefully you chose number 2. If you didn't, that's okay. We know what the correct answer. But if you got it wrong, what does that tell you about eyewitness testimony? Maybe it's a little bit harder than we think. Maybe there are some factors that contribute to people's memory or ability to recall or focus, if you will. And there's a lot of different reasons. And studies have shown that the longer it takes an eyewitness to decide if the suspect is in a lineup, the less confident they actually are. And can you think of why? I'm going to give you a second to think about that. Why? If it takes a person longer to decide if the suspect is in this lineup, the less confident they actually are. Well, one of the reasons why is because, again, we talked about how sometimes people think it's a test. And so what they're doing is they don't really recognize anybody right away, but they might think somebody sort of looks like them, so they're using the process of elimination. Kind of like you do when you take a test sometimes. You might have answer A, B, C, D, and E, and you're going, well, A's not it and E's not it, that's for sure. B, yeah, maybe. C, no, so I can get rid of C, so now you're left with, just a couple, and you're trying to decide or pick out who you think it is. And some people even think, well, because they showed me this lineup, the person has to be in there, so I have to decide. And it takes me a little bit longer. So those are some reasons why. Now, really, eyewitnesses typically take several minutes to point out the suspect because they feel pressured. They want to choose the right one. But if you're really confident, you should be able to decide in under 10 seconds. And 10 seconds is it's not in any law, but it's typically you should be able to look at a photo and go, yeah, I think that's him or her. So about 10 seconds. And some other research from Buckhout in 1974 and then a person by the name of Wells in 1993 indicate that an eyewitness is more likely to falsely identify a person in a set of lineup photographs if there is anything that separates one picture from the other. So if you look at this kind of funny picture that I put here, if they all look the same but one, people tend to gravitate towards the one that kind of looks different. So there is a little bit of research out there on that. So for example, if one picture is larger than the others, if facial features in all the photographs are not identical, so you have 5 with a tattoo and 1 without, 5 without a tattoo and 1 with, one picture is larger, the other ones are smaller. So all of these little things have been kind of found out on studies on identification and memory. And in a study done by Malpass and Devine in 1981, half of their participants in a stage act of vandalism were told that the suspect was in the lineup, while the other half were told that the suspect may or may not be present. Now you're probably wondering what happened. Well, the results are the participants that were led to believe that the suspect was present felt compelled to pick someone, and more often than not, they chose the wrong person because they had that pressure, versus the other ones that were told, hey, there may or may not be the suspect in this lineup. Take a look and let me know. Those had a better accuracy mark versus the other ones, if that makes any sense. Now, think about a situation. So I have a couple quick exercises for you. Think about a situation in which you observe a crime, let's say in this case a robbery, and you were asked a few days later to recall everything that you saw, including what the suspect looked like, what he or she was wearing. What sorts of factors might affect your memory? And you could probably think of some things, and I have a little list here. Again, there are more, but let's look at some big ones. So poor lighting, distance, short exposure, meaning like you only saw them for a second, a mask over the person's face. So these are some factors that we run into in policing quite often. Heightened stress or anxiety, presence of a weapon. So if somebody were to point a weapon at someone, they tend to focus in on the weapon. It's called tunnel vision, and they kind of don't look at all the other stuff. And then someone's own race bias, meaning the tendency for people to recognize faces of their own race more accurately than faces of other races. It doesn't mean that they're racially biased in a sense that they're picking on someone or whatever. There are individuals that are able to recognize faces of their own race more accurately than faces of others. So these are just a couple of factors. So exercise 1, let's do a quick memory test. You're going to have 30 seconds to view the next slide that I show you. And I want you to try to memorize all 20 items that you see. Now, you're not allowed to write anything down until after the screen has been shown. So I'm going to flip the slide here. You're going to have 30 seconds, and you just look at the slide. And then when I tell you to, I'm going to flip the slide, and then you can write down the 20 items that you see. Okay? So here we go with a quick memory test. Five seconds. So now, write down all the items that you can remember seeing. And you can pause the lecture now if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and go forward just to kind of keep things going. But I would pause it now, do all your writing until you can't write anymore, and then you can flip the slide back and see how many you got right. But how many of you remembered seeing a banana, a pin, or a nail? Now, some of you didn't write these in your list, and some of you did. Does anybody know why? The answer to that is at the very beginning, if you remember, I kind of force-fed you a couple of things to jog your memory or to make you think. So if you go, at the very slide, and I'll back up the slide in a second, I asked you if you saw a banana, a pin, and a nail. None of those were on the test. Those comments basically, for the most part, if you wrote down those things, they affected your memory because I kind of implanted false memories. And then again, what does that tell you about real eyewitness questioning by police? So I'm going to back up here, and again, you can look at this at your leisure, but I put these items on here, the light bulb, the apple, the banana, the pin, the nail, to kind of make you think that they're there. But if you look at this list, the light bulb is there, but some of those things aren't there, like the pen, okay, and a couple of the other items. So if you listed that, it's because I kind of led you in that direction. So again, what does that tell you about eyewitness testimony or questioning? And sometimes I put that in there also because sometimes as law enforcement, we ask questions and we plant information in, meaning we give you leading questions. An example of that would be, was the man wearing a black jacket? So basically, I'm leading you to kind of say, yeah, sure. Oh yeah, I think he was. So why could this question present problems? Well, again, because I'm leading you. What would be a better way to ask the question maybe? How about what was the man wearing? And if they say he was wearing jeans and a white shirt and a jacket, you could say what color was the jacket? So that would be a better way of asking the question. So now let's do exercise 2 really quick. And again, I'm gonna pause for a couple minutes, but you can also stop the audio here and you can do the exercise. But now that your eyes and brain are kind of warmed up, let's look at your observation skills a little bit. You're gonna have 2 minutes to study this picture I'm gonna show you of a crime scene. Pay close attention to the details. You're not allowed again to write anything down until time is up, okay? Here's the photo, ready, go. So while you're studying this, I'm not trying to throw you off track, but I'm going to run this for 2 minutes, so there's going to be a little bit of dead time here. But I want you to see it for 2 minutes. And then after I flip the slide, then you can do some writing down, okay? And I'll have questions for you. One minute. So after this next minute expires, I will flip the slide and then I have some questions for you to answer. Okay, well that was probably a little quicker than 2 minutes, but the exercise now, you can start looking at the next 2 slides. Now the slide after that gives you the answers, but here are your questions that I want you to answer. So you can write these down without going back and looking at the slide. This is all memory. What color was the coffee mug? Blue, red, or yellow? What was the deadline? Yesterday, today, tomorrow. What time was on the clock on the wall? 10:40, 11:05, 1:55. How many sticky notes were on the whiteboard? 4, 6, or 8? What was not in the picture? A stapler, trash, can, or printer? What was the name on the plaque? Bill, Brian, or Carl? What color was the victim's shirt? Black, blue, or red? How many plants were in the pictures? None, 1, or 2. What color was the marker in the drawer? Red, blue, or green? Where was the book? On a box in the trash can under the body. So these are all the questions. Okay, so you can answer at your leisure. You can take some time, and when you can't answer anymore, again, don't go back and look at the picture. This is kind of the honesty system, if you will, or honor system. And then after that, when you're all done, you can go to the next slide and you can look at your answers. And these are the correct answers to the exercise. Now, the reason I showed you that is just to show you that memory is kind of interesting. Maybe you got 4 or 5 of these. Maybe you got 7 or 8, or maybe you got them all and you just have a memory like a steel trap. But a lot of people don't. So hopefully you learned a little bit about memory and witness ID and things of that nature. So that's going to be the end of this particular lecture. And until next week, which is going to be your final exam, I will see you then.